definitely getting chilly at night, chilly in the mornings, but it's still that stagnant, dry, hot October. It's a very peculiar month. But our winter went on forever and ever and ever this year here. This didn't seem to end, so it just all works out, I guess, right? Late winter, late summer. My friends at the fish hatchery, the Nat fish hatchery, they said everything was a month late. Every single species, everything was a month late. Everything was a month off. But it's still working. Anyway, check this out. Guess what this is? You can see the whole thing. How's that for a rib? For you rib lovers? That is a whale rib. I don't know which one. It would have been from the body, but it's pretty big, isn't it? I blasted it off with the pressure washer and left it in the sun for the past month and a bit. It's all clean, doesn't stink. That's a hell of a rib. That's like a Fred Flintstone rib. Rib meal. Anyway, got my Swarovski beanie on this morning. Now, what's going on in the world? Lots. I only have one coffee in me so far, so I shouldn't be too ranty this morning. Interesting conversation last night I'm going to share with you guys. Sarah's daughter has her first boyfriend ever. And he's over here for the weekend. He's a good kid. And yes, I'm being nice to him. He's nervous enough coming over. I was going to mess with him, but I've been nice to him. Good kid. But anyway, we ate dinner last night. And his father is into dirt biking and stuff. And his father takes them camping and dirt biking, etc. in all the usual places for a Vancouver family, which would be Squamish, right? Pitt Lake and shit. And he said, and I don't bring this topic up normally at all. I don't tell people about my channel if they don't know about it in person. I'll say, ask me, they'll talk. But I just don't. And I don't even know if this boy knows of the channel or what we talk about here. Probably not. I don't know. But anyway, we were eating dinner last night. Excuse me, we had halibut tacos last night. And how did the topic come about? I asked him where his father went dirt biking mostly. And he said, oh, Squamish lots. And I go, yeah, like dirt bike camp? He goes, yeah, upper Squamish. He goes, yeah, man clam too, we've been camping there. And he goes, oh, you wouldn't believe what happened one time. I heard a cougar one time. These kids are 15, 16 years old. I go, no way, what happened? He goes, oh, I was camping in a tent, and our dog was in my tent, and his friend was in another tent, and his dad was in his tent, and he said he heard the growling outside the tent, but no, everybody's asleep, and his dog was even asleep, he said. And he said he was absolutely terrified when he heard the, quote, cougar growl, end quote. And then I'm like, no way, what'd you do? He said, well, I had some bear bangers, and there's a small hole in the tent, and I was trying to shoot off the bear banger outside the tent. And he said, I screwed up and went off in the tent. Like, no way, we had all a good laugh about that. And woke everybody up. His dad's like, what the hell are you doing? And I think he said he heard something. No, obviously his dog's awake and everybody fell back asleep again. He said his dog was absolutely terrified. And he could hear it out there. He could hear something out there crunching in the bushes. But he said he could hear the cougar crunching in the bushes. I said, did you see the cougar? He goes, no. No, ever heard a cougar before? He's like, But this is close to it right here. And he Googled up cougar sounds, and of course, he goes, not the first part. And the first part of the cougar recording was a typical wow, right? And then it went on to the and then he said, that's kind of like what it sounded like. I go, wow, that low growling. He goes, yeah. And I go, holy shit, that must have been freaking insane. He goes, yeah. And then he went on to say that he goes, even the next day, and then he said that it was pushing on his tent. He said it pushed on his tent, but the pushing on the tent was before he set up the bear banger. For all of you who aren't familiar, bear banger is like a thing. I think you pull the string or something on them, and like a bottle, a rock or something, whatever. You pull this thing and it makes a great big boom to scare away bears. If they're coming in your camp or yard or whatever. He said it was pushing on his tent as well. And I go, no way, the cougar was pushing on your tent. He goes, yeah, I was so scared. He said, and then his dog's awake, and he said, I go, what was your dog doing? He goes, he was scared to death. Really? So then, the next day, he goes, even the next day, it was still there. It was like totally crunching in the bushes all around us in the camp. And I was shooting off lots of bear bangers that didn't even care. I'm like, what? I go, where's your dad? He goes, well, he went into Squamish to go to the store and get some whatever he's going to go get. So the Mamquam River, you can Google it up if you want, Mamquam with a Q, river in Squamish. That goes up into basically ground zero for frequent sightings of these people in the forest. And I never said one word about Sasquatch. I never mentioned it. I never mentioned my channel or what we talk about here. I didn't say a word, and we left it at that, and I listened to a story, and that was it. So there you go. How funny, well, not funny, but coincidental is that? It's so frickin' common around here anyway, for me. Not just for me, I mean anywhere. Anywhere. The topic can come up unexpectedly, and when you do bring it up in certain crowds of new people in various places, there's always going to be someone. Someone has something to share. Always. But anyway, there you go. Take from it what you will or leave it. If I had to be asked to put a wager on that one, that was no cougar. No, it wasn't. And no, we don't hear cougars crunching in the forest. They are absolute silent animals. Same with bears. Bears are real quiet. Bears are kind of somewhat, when you scare a bear, it obviously sounds like a barrel ripping through the bush, and they just break twigs and everything. But when they're just quietly walking, you don't hear a thing. And a lot of you hunters out there who sit on stands and wait for bears to come, you all know you don't hear the bear coming. All of a sudden, there's a bear. All right? So you imagine how much more quiet a wild cat is. They are so quiet as stupid. Furry padded toes. Pretty certain the cougar wasn't crunching down branches, walking around their camp in broad daylight while bear bangers were going on. Right? But there you go. There's another one of tens of thousands. Right? Another one of tens of thousands. What else was I going to share? If anybody, any of you out there feel like a craving to have your brain explode. Did I copy this picture in here or not? I may not have. Anyway, along with my other conversations with a respected friend in Europe last evening, he forwarded on to me. I'll put it in here. We're talking about what's going on the planet. What's going on in this world that we talk about, what's going on in the scientific world, he shares with me. And he also said, side note, check this out. And he shared with me a picture, a photograph of a carved, he called it a seal, and it was basically rock. 6,000 years old, I think he said it was, 6,000? I'll know. I'll put it in text on the video later. And it clearly depicts a carving in the rock of a man dropping a bomb. And the bomb is absolutely a dead ringer right down to the last detail of the atom bomb, the A-bomb, the nuclear bomb, whatever you want to call it. The nuclear bomb that the United States dropped on Japan. And then there is also a perfect explosion mushroom cloud from that bomb, carved into that 6,000-year-old seal, which is obviously a rock tablet. How's that for a brain explosion, right? I'll guarantee you 99.999% of us will have a quick little glance at that and go, huh, wow. And then off we go carrying on our daily routine, right? Isn't it bizarre? Aren't we a bizarre species? Like I said from the beginning, it's not so much I'm amazed at the Sasquatch topic, it's more I have always been more amazed at watching human beings and how they live, how they act, how they react, how they think. That is is and still is today absolutely amazing to me. We are possibly one of the most passive, easily manipulated and controlled herd animal on the planet today. It's amazing how passive we are, is it not? What is there? A couple hundred, maybe? A couple hundred, not even, possibly, what you would call, I guess, elite because of the money they have, who are absolutely controlling billions of people today. How amazing is that? How amazing is that? I wonder who came up with the recipe. I always thought for years there was a recipe, a code, but a recipe that if a human being received that recipe, they could control and manipulate literally billions of human beings. And I believe there is a recipe, and I believe that small handful of people own it. And it's very, very bizarre to watch, right? It's very bizarre to watch. I could go on and give dozens of examples, but it'd just be a ridiculous rant that would annoy the shit out of most people, so I won't. But I'll leave it up to you. If you want to come up with, think about it for about 7 seconds and come up with how many examples you could come up with to prove that we are a very, very submissive, easily controlled herd animal. It's amazing. I wish it weren't true. Hopefully it won't be true for much longer, but you never know. I don't know. Now, what do we got? We have voices to be heard, and they're going to be heard. Take from it what you will or leave it. And if you emotionally react and blow a gasket, well, you're probably in the wrong place. This isn't a safe place for offended culture, I'll tell you what. All right, here we go. No title. Dear Steve, I've watched your channel for some time, and I'm truly impressed with your straightforward approach. The search for the truth in this truly bizarre time we live in takes courage and persistence, and you are just the man to lead the charge. Thank you. I'm not a scientist or someone with inside knowledge, but have read many books on different topics regarding some of the topics you discuss on your channel. Based on that, I want to offer my working theory on why we are being misled regarding the truth. All right, let it rip, and thank you for the kind words. The simple answer is control, power, and money. The New World Order is very real, and so is their agenda. What do they want? A world government checkmated by a world military. A world of kings and serfs. Haves and have-nots. Very wealthy people know if everyone has money, it'll have no value. These sociopaths do not think like you and me. They get power drunk and develop a God complex. We all know who these wealthy families are and that they control our puppet governments. And now we can definitely add China to the mix. Very, very dangerous. Their number one mission is to protect what they have and grow their power and wealth. It makes it much harder if there is no middle class that has a path to the prosperity. So, what do? They develop agendas, techniques, and viruses to quell any upward mobility, anything to destroy upward mobility. This also ties into the Alinsky model. Poor people are much easier to control than people that have options. And why is the UFO, paranormal, and Bigfoot topics being covered up? Steve Greer says it best. If we could use the energy devices these craft use to come here, we would no longer need oil, wind, solar, or any other antiquated fuel source. The entire energy cartel would go broke in a week. Hence, the bad guys have bought and or black shelved over 5,000 free energy patents. Their monopolies and power structures would evaporate overnight. You and I know Bigfoot are real people living in the forest across the world. We're being misled on this topic, just like the UFO topic. Reasons why I think it's being covered up. Number one, the lumber industry will have a massive stranglehold put on it, creating a massive wrinkle in the building industry that drives a huge part of our economies, lost revenue. Number two, organized religion will get turned on its head when the nuclear and mitochondrial DNA is fully revealed. You're working on the nuclear side now, I think. We know the mother side is human from Melba, I believe. The people won't be controlled as easily. Religion helps keep societies in check. Number three, if the Sabbath teach us their ways, or we learn their ways of mind speak, cloaking, sound projection, EMF detection, and so on, our cartel, aka government, won't be able to track us as easily or control us like sheep in the future. then they can really call us domestic terrorists, lol. So of course, like the aliens, they have to make us scared to death of them to create more division. Number 4, if the public finds out about portals that the Sabe use, we may learn and travel to other planets and dimensions through our own free will. Not taken like in Missing 401. Just my opinion on that one. But this would be another threat against the global power structure. Free people scare the hell out of these nutcakes. So in conclusion, it would mean no more 300-foot yachts, no luxury jets, no more pedophile islands, no designer drugs, and no more 900-year-old castle in Bavaria full of servants. But with people like you and your audience, we will keep fighting against evil that hinders this planet. You're a true warrior, champion of the people, Steve. God bless you and your amazing conquest. Mark from Las Vegas. Mark, appreciate you, man. You're a free human being. Well, as free as you can be, right? Las Vegas, I don't know how you live in that heat. I haven't a clue how anybody lives in that heat every day. I think we can agree on 99% of what you wrote in. For myself, I'm not preaching it, but for myself, the logging industry and money, when it comes to the Sasquatch people and us, for me, from what I've learned to date, no. I don't believe, I respectfully disagree, of course, but I don't believe that that is a factor at all. But what, like you say, the skills they have, the knowledge they have compared to us, minions, is unbelievable. Let's face it, I mean, okay, my brain and the way I cruise through this lifetime, honestly, the very first thought that comes to my mind, if I was to be able to cloak and reappear somewhere else, my very first honest thought in my brain comes to, I would cloak and I would appear into possibly the bedroom or the basement or the garage of multiple global dark leaders, and I would do that nonstop until those problems were taken care of and put away forever. That's what I'd do, and that's the first honest thought that comes to my mind. So, I think you're very correct on that one, because you imagine the people who have the recipe to control us, if we had that knowledge and those skills, you're right, they would be nothing instantly, right? And I have a funny feeling that our planet would possibly become a place it's supposed to be, which is encouraging and helping every single human being rock out their human experience to the max, as in being as happy as they can be, healthy as they can be, and enable every single human being to experience as much as they can while they are given this short blurb in time, right? But unfortunately, it's not the way it is right now, is it? I wonder what countries are set up right now to ensure that every single human being in that country has the best time they've ever had. Not too many, right? Kind of weird though. I mean, what is it right now? Isn't everybody giving about 60% of their income to a group of somebodies? I mean, you'd think that if you put 60% of your wages all in the same place that was geared up to make things better for us, it would be better. Probably be better in a fast way, right? But instead, it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse, and we keep giving them more money and more money, and we work harder, we work longer, we donate, I don't know, what are we donating now? 80% of our time to working for that money to ensure we have a better life, and it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse for the majority of us. Can't argue at that point, can ya? Now, moving along. Appreciate your time, man. Appreciate your email. Here we go. Got another one. This is titled Wildlife Manager Story. If you notice, there's a lack of chickens in here, because guess what? Well, there's 2 left. There's 4 left outside. Actually made a proper, perfect fence around the laying hen area and their coop, and they're not allowed out anymore. Celebration time. Hi, Steve. You may want to read this first by yourself prior to sharing. It's long, and you can decide if you want to share it in 1 or 2 parts, or if you want to share it at all. Choice is yours, my friend. Tee it up and let her rip. I always let her rip, given the choice. Steve, please don't share my name or location as I work as a professional and the public would chastise me for coming forward. It's a sad world we live in where you can't speak the truth without being publicly ridiculed and destroyed. First, I'd like to thank Edgar, the Owlman, and your other listeners who have contributed to the Round Table of Knowledge and have helped to expand our minds. Knowledge is power, and it's time to stop being afraid. I'd also like to give a shout out to Don. That was a horrible story about what they experienced and how he lost his girlfriend to suicide. Don, my heart goes out to you. Glad you have started camping again. ER, this next message is for Scott. I'm sorry to hear about your wife's turn in her health. It's been my experience in life that the worst part of cancer isn't what the disease does to the person who is sick, but rather is what it does to the ones they love. My heart truly goes out to your entire family. I will say prayers for healing for your wife, and may God shine His light of mercy and love upon her. Steve, I'd like to thank you for taking the stand and for providing a voice for the dissemination of knowledge. It is much appreciated. Like you, I'm angry and tired of the bullshit and lies. People like Money Loser and his band of merry idiots couldn't find a Sasquatch if you shoved one up his ass. They do nothing but mislead the public and keep the truth in the dark. Yes, they do. I'll agree with that one right across the board. Thank you for bringing this topic into light. We share the same hunger for answers and truth. What you're doing is truly changing the world and helping to create an awakening. I've followed you since before you brought up the Sabbath topic, and I'm finally ready to take my seat at the round table of knowledge. It's amusing when I listen to you talk, and you go on your occasional rants. I really enjoy the rants, by the way. It sounds like I'm listening to myself, and it makes me laugh. We definitely think alike. It's good to know there are others like us in this great big world. I just have to tell you, a couple days ago I was searching for old videos of yours that I might have missed when I stumbled upon the hunting video where you tell the story about guiding a foreign hunter and the miscommunication that happened and how the hunter thought you wanted to shove a guinea pig up his ass. Oh my God, I burst out laughing in my office and nearly wet myself. Everyone in the office looked at me like I had just lost my mind. That was a great story. Thanks for the laugh. I recommend to your listeners that they look up and listen to that episode. It's truly hilarious. Yeah, that was a good one, except I was so cringe. It was so cringe for me when I gave him my translated note. The reaction wasn't what I was expecting, I'll tell you what. Since I haven't given you a name to call me by, you can refer to me as Michael. He's my favorite archangel, the one that kicked ass. As John Travolta famously said, I'm not that kind of angel. Steve, I'm not here to be known by anyone. I'm just here to share what I know and get answers to my questions. I definitely realize that you're probably the key to that end. I don't know. The story you're about to hear is being told by someone who used to work as a wildlife manager. My expertise in wildlife ecology and biology qualifies me as a very credible and extremely knowledgeable witness. I've done a lot of research on the works of Dian Fossey, Virunga mountain gorillas, and Jane Goodall chimpanzees. I also had the privilege to meet Jane and listen to her give a presentation about her years of research. But for the record, I'm not a celebrity wildlife biologist, yeah, thank God. What an egocentric snowflake. That kills me too, Steve. I'll laugh for days. Anyhow, I hope my story bears witness to the truth. It may not fill in any puzzle pieces for your listeners, but they may find it interesting nonetheless. Steve, while I was writing my original story, a memory rushed back of an earlier experience that I had completely forgotten. But now I remember like it was yesterday. It's funny how we suppress and forget terrifying experiences. But I'd like to start with my first experience. The two stories I present are long, so perhaps you will want to read the first one and save the second one for another day. Steve, I grew up in a small community in southeastern Wisconsin that was northwest of the city of Milwaukee. The landscape was an area which consisted of dairy farms with scattered woodlots and marshes. Not what you would typically think of when you hear about Sabbath habitat. My parents lived on the edge of my hometown and owned about 40 acres of land, with half of it made up of hardwoods and some pines. Growing up, I was taught how to hunt and fish at a very young age and spent most of my childhood out in the woods. The woods were my playground, and that's where I spent all my time, often playing by myself. I began hunting and fishing at the age of 4, and my upbringing developed in me a deep appreciation for nature and a keen sense of my surroundings at all times. From a very young age, I was very familiar with all kinds of big game and wildlife throughout the world. Wildlife fascinated me, and I was constantly studying the subject. My first story begins back in the early 70s, when I was 7 years old. One day in early summer, my dad brought home a new 4-person canvas tent so all the kids could camp out in the backyard. We were all excited and couldn't wait for the nighttime parties to begin. The first couple of times we slept in the tent, we were completely uneventful. Not satisfied with just sleeping in the backyard, my older brother and sister asked my parents if we could move the tent into the clearing in the woods. The clearing was a small grassy open area in the woods directly behind my parents' house. My parents thought it would be okay because this part of Wisconsin we really didn't have any predators to worry about. No bears, no cougars, no wolves, and only the occasional coyote or stray dog. In terms of wildlife, it was a pretty safe place to camp, or so we thought. The first night in the woods, nothing unusual happened. And the second night, it was just my older brother, sister, and I sleeping in the tent. We went to the tent at sunset, and after our parents checked on us one last time, they zipped up the tent and told us not to leave the tent unless we had to go to the bathroom. And we were to keep it zipped shut at all times. Well, we all had flashlights, and we laid on our sleeping bags eating popcorn, listening to my brother reading scary books to us. About halfway through the second book, I couldn't keep my eyes open anymore and I fell fast asleep. All of a sudden, I heard a loud noise and I woke up. I sat up on my sleeping bag and looked around the dark tent. The moon was out that night, so there was a little bit of light to see in the tent. I immediately noticed my brother and sister weren't on their sleeping bags and they weren't in the tent. I felt all around for my flashlight, but I couldn't find it. I immediately thought that my brother and sister ditched me and were playing a mean joke on me. Just then I heard the sound of footsteps outside the tent, and I thought that it might be my brother and sister coming back to the tent. Then I heard a loud wah, wah sound, followed by another wah, wah sound from the other side of the tent. The noises were deep and guttural and sounded like very large animals, almost like a bear making a huffing sound. It was nothing I'd ever heard before, and I knew it wasn't my brother and sister. I moved to the front of the tent, which faced deep into the woods, and checked to see if the zipper to the tent was closed, which it was. Then I heard more footsteps. It sounded like something was walking around the back of the tent. And then I heard another wah, wah sound. At this point, I was absolutely terrified. Imagine a 7-year-old child alone in the woods with no flashlight in a pitch-dark tent, and there are several large creatures outside the tent, and they could attack me at any second, or pick you up like a bag of trick-or-treat candy. I know what you're thinking, Steve. Yeah, that really sucks. You're right. It sucked big time. This is every child's worst nightmare becoming a reality. I was trembling with fear and would have pissed myself if I had a full bladder. I didn't know what to do. So I decided to run and make a break for the house. I unzipped the tent as quietly as I could. Once I got it open, I bolted out of the tent as fast as I could run. As I turned around the left corner of the tent to head towards the house, I ran smack into a wall of fur. Oh my God, no way. And face planted in what felt like a big, hairy tree. I got knocked to my ass and was stunned by the impact. I immediately noticed I had a horrible taste in my mouth. As I got a good mouthful of that hairy tree when I ran into it, I wiped my mouth with my hand and started spitting on the ground. It tasted like a sweaty, dirty, wet dog with body odor. Gross. Yuck, it made me want to puke. At this point, I had completely forgotten why I was running in the first place. Must have been the head trauma. I looked up to see what I ran into, and there in front of me stood the largest man I'd ever seen. How many people miss that part when everybody says it? The largest man. Got that? 3-letter word? Man. Say it again. Man. Nope. Not a gorilla. Not a chimpanzee. Not a monkey. A man. It was way too dark to see any features, but I could clearly make out the outline of his body. He was immense, taller than a professional basketball player and twice as wide as a football player, and it looked like he was wearing a heavy fur coat. My mind couldn't process what I was looking at. He was so big that I must have face planted in his lower thigh, or maybe just below his kneecap. He just stood there, completely motionless, and stared down at me. My first thought was, why is he wearing a fur coat when it's so warm outside? That's the exact same thing my grandfather thought when he saw that dude in July. The stun of the impact quickly wore off, and I realized this man might be meaning to harm me. It was an oh shit moment. I immediately felt terrified and remembered why I was running. I jumped to my feet and started sprinting for the house. I screamed the whole way, thinking this huge man was right behind me and was about to grab me. When I got to the back door of the house, I ran through the door and locked it. And then I ran to my parents' bedroom, screaming. I tried telling my parents about the big man, but I could hardly get anything out because I was crying so hard. My parents had a look of panic on their faces and immediately asked, "Where's your brother and sister?" My parents found them sitting in the kitchen eating a snack, and they didn't know what the commotion was about. My brother and sister told my parents that they heard some noises and got scared, so they ditched me and left me in the tent because I was sleeping. They just figured I would be safe in the tent by myself. Not. Bastards. Of course my parents were furious with them. When I calmed down, I told my parents everything that happened. They convinced me that I must have been dreaming and that I just imagined everything. So, being so young, I bought their explanation and put the whole scary incident out of my mind. However, my parents must have somewhat believed my story because the next day, the tent came down and we were never allowed to camp by ourselves again. Steve, that memory came flooding back with much vivid clarity. I can literally taste the savvy in my mouth as I write this. I could really use a shot of bourbon right about now. If that savvy wanted to, it easily could have injured me or worse. From the sounds I heard, I know there were more than one savvy, and I believe they were merely being curious. They never attacked the tent, and they didn't do anything to my brother and sister either. I really don't think they meant any harm. That's a one hell of a frickin' story, man. I'll bet you drilled his kneecap with your head if it was that hard and then dropped you right like a sack of shit. What a shitty experience. Story 2. My second Saturday story occurred back in the mid-70s when I was about 11 years old. My event on a Saturday morning in the early spring. I was sitting at home bored to death with nothing to do. At that time, there was still some patchy snow on the ground, but it was a bright sunny day with a temperature in the upper 40s or low 50s. I decided to grab my coat and go for a walk in the woods behind my parents' house. I walked down the road to the edge of my parents' land and then headed through a field on a vehicle trail that went to the far back side of the woods. The vehicle trail went along the entire backside length of the woods and made for a really nice walking path. Once you're in the woods, to the right of the vehicle trail was a short tree line, and then our property ended at a barbed wire fence. Beyond the fence was a cornfield and then another woodlot, which was about the same size as my parents' woods. Shortly after entering the woods, I noticed that the tree had recently blown over during a storm that we had a few weeks earlier. The tree had fallen onto the barbed wire fence, with the top half of the tree being in the picked cornfield. The tree had actually taken about a 20-foot section of the fence. So I started walking toward the tree to see how badly the fence was damaged. When I got about 30 yards from the tree, I noticed a person stand up on the other side of the fence, on the opposite side of the tree from me. They must have been crouched down hiding behind the tree. The sight of another person startled me and I froze in my tracks. I hollered at them and said, "Who are you and what are you doing here?" This was a very unusual sight. After spending many years playing and exploring in my parents' woods, I never saw another person walking around in it. The person didn't respond to me, and they just stood there staring at me. Because I was standing in the woods and they were backlit by the morning sun, all I could see of the person was the dark silhouette of their body. After studying this person for a few seconds, I soon realized that this person was not an adult, but seemed to be a child about my size. This gave me a sense of relief, and my initial fears subsided. I was wondering why this person didn't respond to me, and thought perhaps they couldn't hear me. Okay, Steve, fasten your seatbelts. Shit's about to get real. Here we go. So, I gathered up my courage and decided to confront this trespasser and find out who they were. I started walking toward the person and I shouted out again, "Who are you and what are you doing here?" Right after I finished shouting the question, the person started acting really strange by swaying from side to side repeatedly. This behavior was very odd and confused me. Steve, this behavior has been reported hundreds of times on your channel. Why do they do this motion? Is this how they block all sound or open a portal or mind speak to us, or is it simply what they do when they get nervous or scared? I can only guess why they do this, but I want answers. Anyway, I kept walking toward the kid and shouted out to him, "Hey, what's your name?" Still no reply. When I got about 15 feet from the kid, 15 feet, that's close, and was close enough to finally get a good look at him, I was suddenly in shock and realized this was no kid. This person was completely covered in dark brown hair and wasn't wearing any clothes, and he had long arms. And I say he because he is obviously male, muscular build, broad shoulders, and was very athletic looking. His face and head looked very human. Let's read that sentence one more time, shall we? His face and head looked very human. He had amber-colored eyes and a wide human nose. The hair was longest on his head and shoulders, but shorter on his chest and stomach. The hair on his forearms were also longer than the hair on his upper arms, and the hair on his lower legs were longer than the hair on his thighs. He looked like a cross between an 11-year-old boy and a chimpanzee, but this looked like no chimp I'd ever seen. His skin was grayish brown in color. The gray color skin sure is common, isn't it? Almost every time. There wasn't much of a wind that day, so I could smell a hint of body odor on him, and I was close enough to smell his breath as he was breathing nervously, almost panting. I'm sure people are wondering, so I'll tell you, his breath smelled like my guinea pig's breath right after it had been eating. That's what it reminded me of anyway, LOL. I wonder how many people are going to go find a guinea pig and smell their breath. I stared at this hairy boy in utter astonishment, not really knowing what I was looking at. The creature looked back at me with the same look of astonishment on his face. I'm sure the young savvy had the same thought I had. Holy shit, what the hell is that? As a child, I'd never heard of Bigfoot and wouldn't be introduced to him in books for a couple more years. I knew all the large primates on the planet, and this thing looked like nothing like them. He was standing perfectly erect like a human, and his facial features looked very human, but perhaps a little primitive. Bottom line, I can definitely say as a wildlife biologist, he wasn't just some type of simple primate or hominid. Instead, he was a person and seemed to be a species extremely similar to humans. An offshoot of Homo sapiens, perhaps, or are we an offshoot of them? I'm not sure what they fall into the human lineage, if at all. The DNA studies you've reported are very intriguing. Either way, I would call them forest people. Being a kid, I just thought he seemed to be a young boy, like me. After staring at him for what seemed like eternity, I decided I would try to communicate with him and be friends. I used the intergalactic universal word for greeting and I said, "Hi." But before I could get out another word, the creature suddenly grabbed the branches of the downed tree and started to violently shake them. And he made the most horrific screaming sound. I think he was trying to scare me, and it worked. He was in total freak-out mode and was scaring the living shit out of me. In fact, I think I may have shit myself 2 or 3 times. I was frozen with fear and didn't know what to do. Suddenly, from the far side of the woods, I started hearing crashing noises and the loud thud, thud, thud of very heavy footsteps running toward me. It sounded like a rhino charging through the forest, and it was coming fast and furious. My blood turned to ice, and the loud sound of snapping trees and branches made me realize that my life was in serious danger. If there was something I learned from watching wildlife shows, the sound of an animal charge meant grave danger. My fight or flight suddenly kicked in, and I immediately turned and started running for my life. As I got to the edge of the woods, I could tell the crashing sounds were getting very close. I turned the corner on the vehicle trail and started running through the field as fast as I could go. When whatever was making the crashing noise reached the area by the young sabe, it turned and started chasing after me along the edge of the woods. Ugh. About halfway past the woods, I could tell that my pursuer had caught up to me and was running parallel to me through the woods, and it definitely sounded like it was running on 2 legs. The creature was snapping trees like a runaway freight train. Because of the heavy, thick bush on the edge of the woods, I couldn't see whatever was chasing me, and only got flashes of something massive and dark. When I got to the end of the woods, I could hardly breathe. My lungs were on fire, and my heart was ripping out of my chest. I was completely exhausted, but I knew I couldn't stop running, or I was dead. I felt like that thing was going to rip me apart. So I kept running with everything that I had. Fortunately for me, my pursuer reached the edge of the woods. When my pursuer reached the edge of the woods, it stopped chasing me. When I reached the road and turned and looked back across the field of the woods to see if it was still coming after me, and even though I couldn't see anything, I could tell it was watching me from the edge of the tree line, and I could feel the weight of its stare. It was angry, and I could feel it. Suddenly I heard a voice inside my head say, "Stay away." That voice was my cue to get the hell out of there, and I continued to sprint for my life until I got back to my parents' house. When I told my family and friends what happened to me, they ridiculed and teased me and didn't believe a single word of what I experienced. So I buried it deep inside me and never talked about it again. Oh, that just frustrates me. Excuse me. Not just your story, but that reaction across the board with most humans just frustrates the shit out of me. Nothing prepared me for what I saw that day, and it forever changes you. That day, I joined the club of no return. Steve, I don't believe that the sabe exist. I know that the sabe exists, and I've known this from a very young age. I also know the government knows about these creatures. What I don't understand is, why is their existence being kept from the people? Why have we been lied to throughout our history? Like you, I want answers. That crashing sound I heard coming through the woods that day had to be an adult sabe charging to defend its young, just like a mother grizzly would. My instincts and knowledge of nature saved my life that day. My advice, Steve, never get between a young sabe and its mother. While I was writing down this second story, I started thinking about all the years I'd played in the woods, and I come to a startling realization: the sabe were always there. Nearly every time I went in the woods, I just didn't know it. Steve, looking back, I would frequently hear wood knocks and whoops while playing in the woods, not having a clue what was making them. A couple times I answered the wood knocks and whoops. One time I got an immediate response. When I answered again, I got a response that was closer, and then another that was getting very close. I immediately got scared and decided to flee, instead of waiting around to see what was making the noise. Another time, when I responded to a wood knock, I got an immediate response in front of me, and then one behind me. This totally freaked me out, as I felt like I was being surrounded. So once again, I fled. I also noticed as a child that I never saw any deer in our woods, ever. Not even any deer sign. And we had a lot of deer in this part of Wisconsin. Did the sabe hunt all the deer out of the area, or were the deer afraid to go in our woods? Steve, I strongly believe the sabe were always in the woods watching me every time I went to play there. If they wanted to harm me, they easily could have done it at any time. I posed no threat to them, and they just kept an eye on me to make sure I stayed out of trouble. That day I met the young sabe was the first day I posed a threat, and it nearly cost me my life. I can't imagine what the adult sabe would have done to me if I would have just stood there and not run. I doubt the adult would have given me time to explain my side of the story. That little sabe shit totally threw me under the bus. With friends like that, who needs enemies? Steve, I do believe that some of Dave's missing 411 are due to the Sabe for various reasons. However, I also believe that many of the missing 411 are likely due to something far more dangerous. I'll explain that the next time I write in. It's hard to imagine something more dangerous. I have a lot more to share with you and your listeners, but I've taken up enough of your time and I'll save it for another day. Believe me, it's going to blow your mind. Steve, be well, my friend, and watch the tree line. It's not the Sabe you have to worry about. By the way, please send me your Proton email address. Searching for answers. Blank blank. Just for you, Steve. Okay, got you, man. I'm right there with you. I've probably got a half a dozen similar items myself. Brand spanking new. Now, that's one hell of a share. And you got my curiosity. You better write me back. Alright? I want to hear every single thing that you have learned. I want to hear every single thing that you've seen and witnessed. Alright? I want to know. I'm pretty sure there's probably tens of thousands. That's weird, eh? Tens of thousands of people are here. But I can assure you that the majority of the people here on this channel want to hear too, so please write it in. Alright? I wish I was set up and had more time. I'd frickin' get you on here live and we could just bullshit it out in one go, but it's just not doable right now. What an experience. I don't think the big one would have killed your ass if you just stood there, because obviously if that thing wanted you dead, felt you a threat, it would have killed you a long time ago, without a doubt. And that young one probably would have just beat your head in with a stick if it thought you were really truly a threat to its life. That's something else, man. Wildlife biology is kind of funny. It's one the other day. We've got another somewhat disgruntled person who makes videos, bad videos about me. And in the past, you know how I've shit all over, openly shit on reality TV people. I've almost vomited when a handful of reality TV producers got a hold of me and asked me if I wanted to do something, and I'm like, fuck, don't ever eat, just lose my eat. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? I have zero respect for reality TV. As far as I'm concerned, if you're willing to go on a reality TV show, you're some screwed up, right? And then of course the wildlife biologist thing. I do not disrespect wildlife biologists in any way, but when it comes to this topic, when I have seen in the past some people sling their dick in front of when it comes to this topic, I'm a wildlife biologist. Are ya? Who gives a shit? Because I'll guarantee you, you were not taught anything about these forest people ever, right? So, the title wildlife biologist doesn't have much weight when it comes to this topic. I'm saying is coincidentally, I was wondering why this one other person kept going out of their way to make vicious videos about me, and they have both been on a reality TV show and carry the wildlife biologist title, so must have struck a chord. and they've been blocked from the channel and keep panicking and making up another channel so they can come back here, eating a shit sandwich every time they gotta watch my ass. Anyway, I'm not gonna go down that route this morning. Those are quite the shares, man. Quite the frickin' shares. I can't wait for you to write back in. I want to learn more. And I would say with absolute confidence, our true natural skills have been intentionally rubbed the hell out, without a doubt. Man, what I would do if I had them. What I would do. I have absolute zero thoughts in me or urges to lead in any way or control people in any way. But I am overwhelmingly dominated with the feelings of wanting to protect and go after bad guys. I just do. I can't help it. I can't help it. I just do. So I know that if I were to be able to be in touch with all those skills again in this lifetime, I definitely wouldn't be using them to gain money or control people. I would absolutely use those skills to annihilate the dirty, filthy pricks off the face of this planet. That's what I would probably fill my time with until every single one of you began to have the most happiest, outrageously exciting and free time of life that you could ever have. That's what I would do. That's what I'd do. What else? Quick tidbit, when you were the previous emailer, when you were mentioning about, you know, they were there the whole time, they're watching you. That instantly put me back to my mother and her absolute, sorry excuse of a human being, second husband, alcoholic, bully, slime bag. They moved to rural Souk, British Columbia. When I was a kid, and I still lived in Victoria, I had to go to school. And then as part of the divorce agreement, I had to go out there every second weekend, whatever the hell it was. And the second I got there, there's a recurve bow sitting there because the place of employment he was at was a large sheet metal business, union sheet metal business in Victoria, and the majority of the guys in the shop were into bow hunting and fishing. And he tried to get into it with them, probably tried it out for a weekend and never followed through. So that bow's sitting there, all right? So for me, I would get picked up after school by my mom, usually, when she'd get off work in Victoria, and she would drive me all the way out to Souk, and I'd be there for the weekend until Monday morning, and then we'd drive all the way back in Victoria, and I'd get dropped off to go to school and back at home. So the time that I would be out there for the weekend, I would basically get out of the car on the Friday, grab that bow, and I would take off. I'd disappear into the forest by myself, because if you went up to the top of the road, just past their house, it was called Lannon Creek Trailer Park, but they had a real nice double wide thing with an ocean view on top of the hill. But back and behind, that was it. There's a power line there, and Harbor View Road, I think, was the name of the logging road that took off up into those hills there. And I would go up, and there was a pile of soil there, you know, with wood chips in a big pile of soil like that, and all the other materials they used for the upkeep of this place. It's quite nice, actually. And I didn't have a target on anything, so I remember I'd get 4 sticks about that big. I'd put a stick in the dirt, stick and a stick and a stick, and I would go back. I'd start shooting that bow. And that's actually the beginning of my path to becoming a hunter. But anyway, I'll never forget, because I used to go, I'd get out of the car, in the house, grab the bow, disappear, just to stay out of that house. Just get away from that drunken piece of shit. And I would, my poor mom, I would make her set the alarm clock for like 4:30 in the morning. It was earlier in the summer, whatever. I'll never forget, 4:30 in the morning. And I would get up and I would take off in the dark. When I was like 12 or 13 or whatever it was, with that bow. Because now I'm hunting rabbits. Now I am a natural hunter, and I have the urge to hunt, and I'm only going to get a rabbit. So I'd take off in the forest, and I would stay in the forest all day long until dinner time, if not later. Or sometimes I'd come back for lunch and turn around and rifle right back out there in the forest and just disappear. And I did that all the time. But anyway, I'll never forget, and this is before any of my experiences or knowledge of these bush people, while I was shooting my bow into that mound of soil, so I'm shooting this direction, the homes are back this way, the full wall of timber, and the power line took off at an angle like that, up into the hills, was full bush. Bush straight up that way. And the creek is Lannon Creek. The creek came out of those thick willows right there, about 100 yards from me, on that angle. So I'm shooting there, I'm shooting to the soil, pulling my arrows out and coming back and shooting, coming back. And I'll never forget, I had a burning sensation coming from those thick alders where the creek came out of, from that dark. It was a bit of a cut, right? And the creek is in the bottom. It was all thick. You could see shit in there. It was dark in there. I would say probably 90% of the time when I went up there to practice that bow and shoot into that mound, I was absolutely concerned, and if not even a little bit nervous, and I would never get too close to that wall of bush where the creek was coming out. I couldn't do it, wouldn't do it. It made me nervous. Right? It made me nervous. Now, years later, I'm pretty confident I know why, without a doubt. And some things or someone definitely had an interest in watching me shoot those arrows into that dirt and picking them out of the dirt and walking back. But it's really weird because then when I noticed too, as I got more confident, I would have to cross the creek, climb up the rock face to get underneath the power lines, and I'd follow the power lines west. And from up there, you had a huge view of the Sauk Basin and the Pacific Ocean, and all the Sauk Hills down below and off to the right and to the left. And I never had confidence when I went out there, but there's just something about that. There's a block. It's like an invisible line right there, getting back towards the headwaters of that creek or whatever it was. There was something going on there that wouldn't allow me to. I wouldn't even go in there. I wouldn't even walk up the creek to see what was in there. I just kept it. It's like having the hair on your neck stand up, but only on one side. If I was facing the creek on this side, the hair on my neck and ear would this side. If it's this side, it would do the same here. It's just always there. And the story goes on and on. I mean, eventually I finally got my first rabbit. And then some of the guys at the shop invited me to go to the 3D shoots at Vancouver Island, which I started getting really good at, and I saved up my money, and I got my first compound bow, and I managed to get 2 deer by myself with my bow and arrow. The one was a great big 5-point, 4-point black-tailed deer, and then that was it. It was on, and it never stopped. Here I am today. But anyway, how's that? I guess that was my second coffee blurb, wasn't it? I'm screwing up. I'm not getting voices heard. Hold on a minute. Let's get. How long's this one? All right, let's get another voice heard, and then I got to get out of here and carry on with my fencing in the gross October heat. All right. Bizarre event while camping near Caledon, Ontario. Back in the summer 2016, about 10 of us went camping on private property just northwest of Toronto. Everyone had their own tent and set them up, spread apart within a hardwood forest. We all went to bed between midnight and 1 a.m. I was the last one to return to my tent, could not sleep. After 45 minutes or so, I was finally starting to drift off when I heard a continuous tone. Remember back in the day when local TV stations would shut down for the night? There would be colored bars on the screen and a tone to indicate that said channel is finished broadcasting for the night. Remember it? The tone I heard was similar to that. I immediately sat up in my bed and a thought entered my mind that this could be coming from a UFO hovering overhead. Wow. The tone then continuously got louder and was accompanied by a vibration that I could feel within my entire body. I tried covering my ears and my hands and came to the realization that this sound was not external. Covering my ears did nothing. That's alarming. A bright light from above then shone down into my tent and seemingly warmed me up. It was chilly that night. After what seemed like a minute or two, the light went out, the tone stopped, and somehow I sensed that the craft above me had flown off. A second or two later, I heard a very loud jet plane fly by overhead. I've been to air shows before and I know what a fighter jet sounds like, and that sound was definitely external, and plugging my ears did help that time. There was no fear in my experience, only interest and fascination. This has never happened to me before or since. The next morning I only asked the others if they heard that jet last night, and no one heard it. Growing up in rural Bruce County back in the 70s and 80s, I always had a keen interest in Sasquatch, aliens, and ghosts. I read everything I could find on the subject. In 2009, I began practicing spirituality with various plant medicines. I soon became very sensitive to energies that surround us all. Some are good and others are not. The old building I live in Toronto is very active. It is common for me to feel and sometimes see energies pass through my apartment. I never run away from an experience. Cheers, Chris. Holy shit, Chris. There's a road you've chose to go down that I'm not really curious about to do myself. I know there's a bunch of shit, crazy dark shit going on. I'm just not into myself. I'm not into inviting those energies into my home, right? I like having a secure shop and home and personal space without it being entered at leisure by something possibly dark or terrifying, right? I have enough of that shit I gotta live with in the timber. But anyway, horses are roaming around the frickin' yard because I didn't get that fence completed yesterday. But I have they're fenced off at the head of the property. They can't get out, but they're ripping around the yard, eating everything. So I gotta get my ass in gear and get that fencing done. Hope this video helped somebody. I'm sure it did. And remember, any and all information that I may share in a post or verbally on this channel is meant for you to take from it what you will or leave it, and if you find it helpful and you feel it's important for others to hear it too, share it with them. All right? But do not blow an emotional gasket and lash out at myself or anybody else here. That just shows the world that you're weak, mentally challenged, and unfortunately possibly not salvageable. All right? And we don't really need you here. Okay? We need confident, free-thinking, brave people here. We need as many of those people as we can get, and we need every single one of those people to pass on knowledge at all costs. Just pass it on, do your part. At least you did your part. No matter what the reactions you get from sharing knowledge, at least you did your part. Right? That's what I said earlier. At least I can go to sleep knowing I did my part and I shared what I learned. No matter what it does to the fragile minds out there that may come across it, at least I shared it. I did my part. Only I'm not going to stop. Write me back. Write in. Share my story at howtohunt.com. We're here for you. We're all here together. And you need something to help you or help others, get it into me, and I'll share it with everybody, all right? I'll be back.